Poor mechanic rescues chained girl in the rain, unaware she's a billionaire. The rain poured hard over the Pittsburgh skyline, hammering the rusted rooftops of the industrial district like war drums. It was past midnight, and the streets had fallen silent save for the occasional distant honk or the whisper of water sliding down gutters. The air was thick with steel, soot, and the smell of old oil, a scent Jake Matthews knew all too well. Jake, 29, closed the garage door behind him with a grunt. His denim jacket, already damp at the shoulders, clung heavily to his frame. The soft neon glow of Matthews' auto repair buzzed overhead, casting a ghostly red hue on the wet concrete. It had been another long day filled with busted transmissions and customers who didn't care about names, only prices. He flicked off the last interior light, ready to retreat to his small apartment upstairs when a sound stopped him. Help! He froze. The voice was faint, broken, a whisper carried on the rain. Jake turned his head, squinting into the darkness near the alley. A few cautious steps brought him past the dumpster and into the narrow path behind the shop. There, barely illuminated by the spill of light from the garage, he saw her. A girl, mid-20s at most, chained to the iron fence that bordered the abandoned warehouse next door. Her soaked clothes clung to her skin, her face hidden beneath plastered strands of wet hair. Her body shivered violently, the chain around her waist locking her to the fence like some cruel medieval punishment. For a moment, Jake thought he was hallucinating. But no, she was real, and in pain. "What the hell?" he muttered, stepping closer. She stirred at his voice, her eyes barely able to open. "Please, help me. They'll come back." "Who did this to you?" he asked, kneeling beside her, checking the lock. "I don't know who you are," she gasped, "but if you don't get me out of here, I'll die tonight." Jake didn't wait for more. He rushed back to the garage, grabbed a crowbar and his pliers, and returned with urgency burning in his chest. The chain was thick, rusted, but it snapped after a few tense minutes. As the links clattered to the wet ground, the girl slumped forward, her strength finally gone. He caught her. "I got you," he whispered, half to her, half to himself. He carried her inside, kicking the door shut with his heel, and gently laying her down on an old padded bench near the shop's space heater. Her skin was ice cold, her lips tinged with blue. He threw his cleanest towel over her shoulders and began drying her with a mechanic's tenderness, rough hands made soft by purpose. "I don't even know your name," he said quietly. "You don't want to," she replied, her voice barely audible. "If you know, they'll come for you too." Jake blinked. The absurdity of the situation hadn't sunk in, but something in her tone made him believe every word. "Lady, you showed up chained in the rain. They already made it my problem." She gave a faint, exhausted smile, then coughed again, a sound that twisted in his gut. "Men." He handed her a lukewarm mug of coffee, and she gripped it like a lifeline. The garage grew silent, save for the hum of the heater and the rain pattering on the tin roof. Jake sat across from her, watching her drink with shaking hands. He didn't know what he had just stepped into, but one thing was certain. This wasn't just a girl in trouble. This was the beginning of something far bigger. Morning crept in like a secret, gray light bleeding through the grime-streaked garage windows. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but the cold still clung to the air. Jake stood by the counter, pouring hot water into a chipped mug, the scent of weak tea mixing with the familiar musk of oil and iron. On the old padded bench, she stirred beneath the blanket he'd wrapped around her. Her eyes opened slowly, pupils adjusting to the soft light. For a moment she seemed disoriented, caught between the memory of being chained in the storm and the surreal calm of this warm, quiet room. Jake approached with quiet steps, holding out the mug. "It's hot. Careful." She pushed herself upright, wincing as stiff muscles protested the movement. The oversized hoodie he'd found for her hung loosely from her frame, swallowing her thin shoulders. Her fingers trembled as she accepted the tea. "Thanks," she whispered, voice raw and rasping. Jake didn't speak right away. He just sat across from her on a battered stool, arms resting on his knees, eyes studying her with quiet concern. "What's your name?" he asked softly. Her eyes flicked to his, then quickly away. I can't tell you that. Then tell me what the hell's going on, he said, more gently than the words suggested. You were chained to a fence like some kind of prisoner. That doesn't just happen. She took a shaky sip, steam curling past her lips. Her voice, when it came, was even softer than before. If I tell you, you'll be in danger too. Jake exhaled slowly. Lady, you're already here. You think I'm not already involved? Silence stretched between them. Then, suddenly, panic flared in her eyes. You can't call the cops? She blurted. Please, no police. Jake frowned. You need help. Real help. Someone did this to you. You were nearly dead last night. If I go to the police, she said, voice tight and trembling, they'll find me. They'll kill me before I can speak. They'll make it look like an accident. Like I was never here. Jake's brows furrowed. Who's they? She didn't answer. Instead, she pulled the hoodie tighter around her, the edge slipping down just enough to reveal the bruises on her collarbone. Deep, dark, and unmistakably fresh. Jake's jaw tightened. That from last night? He asked, nodding toward the mark. She quickly tugged the fabric up, hiding the evidence. Who did this to you? He asked again, his voice lower now. Gentler. I can't tell you, she whispered, staring at the mug like it could protect her. Not yet, but they're powerful. If they know I'm alive, everything I'm trying to protect, everything I know, it'll be over. Jake leaned back, processing her words. Then what am I supposed to do here? Hide you? Pretend this didn't happen? She looked up at him then, really looked. Her eyes were wide and pleading. But beneath the fear, there was something else. A flicker of something long buried. Hope. I'm not asking you to fix it, she said. I need somewhere to breathe. To think. Just for a little while. Jake didn't answer right away. He'd seen a lot in his years fixing busted cars and watching people fall apart. Junkies. Runaways. Drifters with stories they couldn't finish telling. But this was different. She was different. He stood up without a word, walked to the shelf behind him, and grabbed another blanket. Tossed it to her. You can stay, he said. For now. She blinked, startled. Why are you helping me? Jake shrugged, already turning toward his tools. Because you looked like someone who needed it. She didn't reply, but for the first time since she'd woken up, her shoulders relaxed just a little. As Jake resumed, tinkering with a busted alternator, he couldn't help but glance her way every now and then. She was curled up on the bench, the blanket around her shoulders, the tea close to her chest. But her eyes never stopped scanning. Windows, exits, shadows. Whatever she was running from, it wasn't done chasing her. And Jake, for reasons he couldn't explain yet, wasn't about to let her run alone. The neon lights at the corner gas station buzzed weakly under the washed-out Pittsburgh sky. Jake rubbed his brow with the back of his hand, the scent of gasoline clinging to his clothes. He had only stepped out to grab a gallon of oil and a snack, something normal, something simple, but then he heard it. A voice. Low, sharp, urgent, cut through the air like a wire pulled tight. She's still out there. The Sterling girl. I don't care how. Find her. Finish it before anyone hears a word. Jake's blood turned cold. He ducked behind the vending machine, barely breathing. Just a few feet away stood a man in a black trench coat, speaking into a burner phone with the calm of a man used to giving deadly orders. No, she escaped. I don't know how. Just handle it. No witnesses. The call ended. The man melted into the fog like a phantom. Jake didn't move for a full minute. His thoughts roared like an engine. Sterling? The name rang a bell. Sterling, like the giant energy conglomerate. The name on every gas pump, every billboard in half the state. His chest tightened. Jake got in his truck and drove back to the garage, faster than he should have. His mind raced with pieces that had never belonged to him until now. Money, power, secrets, and a girl chained in the rain who wouldn't tell him her name. When he arrived, Sarah was sitting on the edge of the old couch, wrapped in his wool blanket. Her eyes met his, the moment the door opened. There was dread in them already, like she knew he'd learned something she hadn't meant for him to find out yet. Sarah Blythe. Jake shut the door, locked it. Sarah Blythe. Then turned to her. "Who are you really?" She stiffened. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. "I was at the gas station," Jake said, stepping closer. "I overheard something. A man. He said your name. The Sterling girl. That you escaped. That they need to finish it." Sarah's face went pale. The color drained from her cheeks like a dam breaking. Jake took another step forward. His voice wasn't angry, it was calm, focused. "If I'm going to protect you, I need the truth. All of it." Silence. And then, in the quiet hum of the garage, she whispered, "My name is Sarah Sterling." Jake blinked. He took a step back, like the name had pushed him. "As in Sterling Energy?" he asked. She nodded. Her voice was a broken ribbon. "I'm the last Sterling left." The words hit like a punch to the chest. Jake had seen her bruises, her fear. But this was more than some mob chase. This was legacy. This was money and power and blood. "My parents died in a plane crash last year," she said slowly. "Everyone said it was an accident. I didn't believe it." Jake didn't move. He just listened. "My brother Victor took over the company. I was still in mourning, still trying to get my footing. But I started seeing things. Strange transfers. Missing funds. Things no one wanted to explain." She swallowed hard. "I confronted him 2 weeks ago. I told him I had proof. I told him I'd go to the board." Jake's jaw clenched. 2 nights later, someone broke into my apartment. I was drugged. When I woke up, her voice cracked. I was chained to that fence in the rain." Jake stared at her, silent. "I was supposed to die out there," she said, "and no one would have questioned it. Another girl who vanished. A scandal buried with silence." He finally sat down, running a hand through his hair. "Do you still have the proof?" She nodded. "It's on a USB drive. I backed everything up. I hid it before they found me." Jake leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Where?" "Old warehouse district. Under the supply shelves. I didn't think I'd ever get back there alive." His voice was quiet, edged in steel. "You're telling me your own brother tried to kill you for money?" Sarah met his eyes. Her own were red but steady. "Not just money. Control. The company. The empire. My silence." A long pause. Then Jake stood, walked to the window, and stared out at the misty street beyond. "You should have died that night," he said quietly. "I know," she whispered. "But you didn't." He turned back to her. "And maybe that means something." Sarah's breath hitched. She looked at him, and for the first time since she'd arrived, she didn't seem like a runaway. She looked like someone ready to fight. Mupershenanring. Jake stepped toward her again. "You're not alone anymore. I'm in this, whatever it takes." Sarah's eyes welled, not with fear, but with something deeper. Something like belief. The storm had not let up. Rain fell like silver needles from the sky as Jake and Sarah stood side by side at the mouth of the alleyway. Ahead of them loomed the rusted gate to the abandoned warehouse district, a relic of Pittsburgh's industrial past, now forgotten, rotting in shadows and silence. Jake had one hand on the wrench tucked into his belt loop. It wasn't much, but it was solid, heavy, something he could swing if things went south. Sarah, wrapped in the same worn hoodie from the garage, held a small paper map folded and faded, the ink beginning to smudge from the damp. Her other hand rested inside her coat, close to her ribs, as if guarding her heart or something deeper. "It's under the old supply shelf," she whispered. "Far back corner. I stashed it in a hollow beam before they caught me." Jake nodded. "We go in, we go quiet. In and out. Fast." The plan was simple. The danger wasn't. They moved together through the alley, boots splashing in puddles, slipping over broken crates and scattered debris. The warehouse loomed larger now, its corrugated walls flaking with rust, windows shattered like broken teeth. Graffiti lined the metal siding, angry colors beneath the heavy rain. Jake pushed the side door open slowly. It groaned on its hinges like an old man waking from a bad dream. Inside, darkness swallowed them. The air was thick with dust and mildew, the scent of mold clinging to their throats. Their footsteps echoed on the concrete floor. Every creak of steel, every clatter of loose chains above, felt like an alarm. Sarah pointed toward the back. There, behind those crates. But before they could move 10 steps, the silence cracked. A crunch of glass behind them. Jake spun around. Down! He shoved Sarah hard to the ground just as the first bullet ripped through the air, smashing into the pillar where she had been standing. The second shot missed Jake's head by inches. He ducked low, heart pounding, and spotted a shadowed figure stepping from behind a stack of pallets, face hidden, gun raised. Without thinking, Jake lunged. The wrench flew through the air with all the force of a man who had spent his life breaking and fixing machines. It connected with a sickening crack. The man went down, hard. Sarah scrambled toward a rusted beam, ducking behind it, her breath ragged and panicked. "They found us," she gasped. Jake yanked the wrench from the floor, his arms slick with rain and sweat. 2 more figures appeared across the warehouse, shouting, weapons raised. Their voices were muffled by masks, but their intent was clear. No witnesses. Jake grabbed Sarah's hand and pulled her up. "Run!" They sprinted, dodging between broken machinery, weaving beneath dangling chains and collapsed scaffolding. Gunfire erupted behind them, lighting up the warehouse with staccato flashes. A metal beam sparked as a bullet ricocheted just inches from Sarah's head. Jake spotted an emergency door. "This way!" He slammed a shoulder into it, and they burst out into the night, landing on a gravel pathway lined with train tracks. Fog rolled low, curling through the darkness like ghosts. Sarah stumbled, tripping on a broken board. Jake caught her, but not before the sharp sound of another gunshot rang through the air. He grunted, staggering as red bloomed across the fabric of his upper arm. "Jake!" she cried, grabbing him. "You're hit!" "I'm fine," he gritted out. "Keep moving." They bolted toward the nearest shelter, a half-collapsed maintenance tunnel near the tracks. Jake ducked under first, pulling Sarah in behind him. Rain trickled through the cracks above. It was cold, dark, and full of silence. But for now, it was safe. Jake slumped against the wall, his hand clamped over the wound. Sarah knelt beside him, fingers trembling as she pulled up his sleeve. "God, this is bad. It's just a scratch," he said through clenched teeth, even as blood soaked through his shirt. She looked at him, eyes full of fear and guilt. "You didn't have to come with me. You didn't have to do any of this." He met her gaze with surprising calm. "We need that drive. We end this tonight." Her lower lip trembled. "Jake, no one's ever fought for me before." His hand found hers, bloodied, shaking, but steady. "I'm scared, Sarah, but not for me. I'm scared of what'll happen if they get to you again. I'm scared they'll silence you. Forever." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "I'd rather die than let that happen," Jake whispered. Her breath hitched as she leaned in, resting her forehead against his. "No one's ever stayed," she murmured. "No one's ever fought for me." Jake closed his eyes. "Then let me be the first." They sat in the dark, hearts pounding, breath mingling in the cold air. Outside, the storm raged on. But in that tunnel, in that fragile moment of pain and resolve, something stronger than either of them took root. Not just survival, but love. And the promise of a fight not yet lost. Rain still whispered outside as Jake and Sarah crouched in the darkness of the maintenance tunnel. The pain in Jake's arm was pulsing now, dull but persistent. But he refused to rest. Every second they sat still was a second closer to being found again. And they couldn't run forever. "We go now," he muttered, bracing against the wall and standing. Sarah hesitated. "Jake, you're bleeding." "Doesn't matter," he said. "We don't leave without that drive." They moved again through the fog, doubling back into the warehouse from a different side entrance. The place was quiet now, too quiet. Whoever had chased them seemed to think the job was finished, the ghosts of gunfire fading into the steel bones of the building. Sarah led the way this time, eyes locked on the far corner where broken shelving units leaned against the back wall. She dropped to her knees and pried at a loose panel beneath a rusted supply shelf. There it was, a small black USB, taped to the underside of a hollow beam right where she had left it. Her hand shook as she pulled it free. Jake crouched beside her, breathing heavy, face pale. "You got it?" She nodded, clutching it like a lifeline. "Let's get out of here." Back at Jake's friend's computer repair shop, the atmosphere was tense. The room was dimly lit by the glow of 3 computer monitors, their pale blue light flickering across Jake's weary face. Sarah sat beside him on a metal stool, arms crossed tightly over her chest, her eyes never leaving the screen as code lines scrolled like falling dominoes. Jake inserted the drive. A long pause. Then the files opened. Class encrypted spreadsheets, bank records, transaction logs. Class, page after page of damning evidence. Sarah's breath hitched. "That's it. All of it." Jake's jaw clenched. He moved millions, shell companies, offshore accounts. This isn't just corporate theft. This is calculated, premeditated. "He planned it before our parents even died," Sarah said, her voice hollow. "The plane crash wasn't an accident. He didn't just steal from the company. He took lives." Jake looked over at her. Her hands were clenched white against her knees. "You go public with this," he said, "and he'll come at you with everything. Lawyers, media, hell, maybe worse." "I know," she whispered. He watched her for a moment, then asked the question hanging between them. Then what are we doing here?" "We could send this to a journalist. The FBI. Let someone else carry the weight." Sarah stood slowly, walked to the edge of the room, and stared at the USB in her hand like it might explode. "If I hand this off," she said softly, "I disappear again. I hide. That's what Victor wants. Silence." Jake didn't answer. She turned back to him, her eyes clear now, but shining. "I'm not afraid of him anymore," she said. "Not the way I used to be." He stood, facing her fully. "Then what are you afraid of?" Her lips parted. For a moment she didn't speak. Then her voice broke. "Losing you." The words hit him like a blow to the chest. "I've never had someone stand between me and danger before," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You didn't owe me anything, but you fought anyway. You bled for me." Jake stepped closer, slowly, deliberately. "I don't want to lose that. I don't want to lose you." Jake reached out, cupping her face in his calloused hands. "You won't." "You can't promise that," she said, tears falling now. "You don't know what's coming." "I don't," he admitted. "But I know this. When you showed up at my garage, you were broken. But you still fought. You made me fight again. You reminded me that there's something out there worth protecting." Her forehead pressed against his. Jake whispered, "Stay alive. Not for justice, not for revenge. Stay alive for us." Her hands covered his. "I'll stay," she said. "But only if you do too." He smiled softly. "Then we fight this, together." And they kissed. Not with fear, but with the fire of 2 people who had been through the storm and now chose each other, no matter what came next. Later, in that quiet shop full of wires and humming machines, Jake clicked send. The files scattered across the internet, sent to trusted journalists, law enforcement, and backup drives hidden in cloud servers around the world. The truth was no longer in hiding. And neither were they. Sarah looked over at him. "Now what?" Jake leaned back, eyes on the ceiling. "Now we wait for the world to burn." The sun was barely up when Sarah stepped out of the motel room, envelope in hand. The air was thick with fog, wrapping the city in a hush like the world itself was holding its breath. Across the street, the towering glass facade of the Sterling Energy Building gleamed faintly beneath the early light, sterile, untouchable, arrogant. It stood like a monument to the man who had tried to bury her. She crossed the street slowly, carefully, as if each step might trigger something too heavy to carry back. When she reached the main entrance, she didn't go inside. She simply slipped the envelope into the building's street-level mailbox, turned, and walked away without looking back. Inside the envelope was no evidence, just a letter, a goodbye, a reckoning, a warning. Victor, you took everything. Our parents, our company, my name. You tried to take my life. But you never took my voice, my Noel. I remember when you used to hold my hand when I was afraid of thunderstorms. When you promised you'd protect me after Dad died. Maybe that boy still lives somewhere inside you, but the man you became, the man who ordered me chained and left to die? He is not my brother. I hope one day you remember who you were before greed turned you into a ghost. I'm not hiding anymore. Sarah. By noon, the headlines had detonated across every major news outlet. Sterling empire rocked by scandal. Billionaire CEO under criminal investigation. Whistleblower uncovers massive corporate fraud. Then came the footage. Grainy cell phone videos showed Victor Sterling being escorted out of a boardroom in handcuffs. His face was pale but defiant, his suit impeccable, his lips pressed into a tight line. Behind him, camera flashes erupted like gunfire. His eyes, cold and furious, scanned the crowd, searching, hunting, for someone he could no longer silence. Sarah sat on the edge of the motel bed, wrapped in a blanket that still smelled faintly of the garage, metal, soap, warmth. The TV played on low volume, Victor's face frozen mid-frame as he was pushed into a waiting black car. Jake sat beside her, quiet. She didn't speak. He reached over and took her hand, gently lacing his fingers through hers. "You did it," he said, but Sarah didn't smile. Her eyes stayed on the screen. "I thought I'd feel free," she whispered, "but all I feel is empty." Jake exhaled, resting his arm around her shoulders and pulling her in. She leaned against him, her head finding his chest, her fingers still trembling. "That's grief," he murmured. "It doesn't care if justice came. It still hurts. Because some part of you hoped he'd choose love over power." She nodded, eyes burning but dry. "He was my family." Jake pressed a kiss to her hair. "Now you get to choose your family." They sat like that in silence, the motel room small and forgettable but full of something bigger than either of them had felt in a long time. Peace. Not the kind that comes from safety, but from truth. From choosing not to run. A week later, Sarah stepped down officially from the Sterling board. Her statement was simple, but the media couldn't stop replaying the final lines. "I renounce all claim to the Sterling fortune and its holdings. My only wealth is the freedom to do good, and I intend to spend it well." And she did. Instead of boardrooms and security convoys, Sarah now walked the cracked sidewalks of a working-class neighborhood on the east edge of Pittsburgh, where the sign above a modest brick building read, Second Start Community Center. Inside, Jake ran his hands-on mechanics class, teaching teenagers how to repair engines with more patience than anyone had ever shown him when he was their age. Sarah ran the legal clinic next door, offering advice to women escaping abuse, eviction, and systems that never cared for them. She listened, not as someone above them, but as someone who knew what it meant to fight for your name. One afternoon, a thin girl no older than 12 approached, her backpack nearly swallowing her small frame. "Miss Sarah?" Sarah knelt, smiling gently. "Yes, sweetheart." The girl pulled a wrinkled flyer from her pocket. "My mom saw this. She said it meant we had to run, that it was finally safe we came here. You helped her find a shelter. She said it was because of you." Sarah blinked, her voice catching. The girl continued, eyes wide and honest. "You're not a princess or anything, but my mom says you saved us." Sarah's throat tightened. She pulled the girl into a soft hug, arms wrapped around the tiny frame as if holding something fragile and unbreakable at once. "I'm not a princess, Kay," she whispered, "but I promise you're safe now." And she meant it. More than anything she had ever said behind a podium or microphone. This was her truth. That evening, as the sun melted over the rooftops of the neighborhood, Jake stood beside her in the rooftop garden they'd started for the center. Small boxes of herbs, wildflowers, and hope. He wiped his hands on a rag and smiled as she approached. "Busy day?" Sarah nodded. Best one yet. He studied her carefully. You sure about all this? No limos? No empire? No press? She looked out over the street, where kids rode bikes and a mural was blooming on the wall across from the center, volunteers painting joy where walls had known only gray. She slipped her hand into his. I spent my whole life being told who I was supposed to be, she said quietly. Now I get to decide. She turned to face him fully, her eyes shining in the gold light of sunset. I choose this. I choose you. Jake didn't answer with words. He just pulled her into his arms and held her, not like a hero, not like a protector, just a man who knew the weight of being loved, finally, for exactly who he was. And beneath the fading sky of a city that had once tried to swallow them both, Sarah Sterling smiled, for real this time. Not because she had escaped the storm, but because she had walked through it and survived. The wind off the Monongahela River was gentle that evening, warm enough to loosen coats and soften hearts. The steel bridge that crossed just south of the city groaned faintly beneath their steps, an old relic of Pittsburgh's past, weathered but still standing strong. Jake and Sarah stood at the center of the bridge, the skyline behind them glowing in soft amber and rose. The sun was setting slow, as if it too wanted to linger in this moment a little longer. Below them, the water caught the last golden streaks of light, rippling like liquid memory. Jake leaned forward on the railing, arms folded, watching the current flow beneath. Beside him, Sarah stood quietly, her curls stirred by the wind, her coat unbuttoned. Her hands were tucked into her sleeves, but her breath was calm, steady, no more fear. Just stillness. For the first time in months, they didn't have to run, they just were. Jake broke the silence first. I used to think I was just broken, some busted-up mechanic nobody needed, fixing things because I couldn't fix myself. Sarah turned to look at him, her face glowing in the light. You weren't broken, Jake. You were waiting. He tilted his head, smiling. Waiting for what? For the right engine, she said, stepping closer. To restart. Jake chuckled softly, his eyes full of something warmer than humor. He reached out and took her hand. You know what you were supposed to be? Untouchable. A billionaire. A name on a building. She arched an eyebrow, amused. And? And instead, he said, you're the most real person I've ever met. Sarah blinked against the wind, emotion threatening to rise again, but this time not from sorrow. You're the first person, she said, who looked at me and didn't see a last name, didn't see a target, or a story. You saw me, and you stayed. Jake's fingers tightened gently around hers. I'll always stay. The words weren't fancy. No orchestral score behind them, no applause, but they were honest. The kind of promise that isn't spoken often, because it means something when it is. They leaned in at the same time, and under the pastel glow of the fading sun, they kissed. Not with urgency, not out of fear, but with the deep, grounded ache of two souls who had been shattered and somehow, miraculously, found each other in the wreckage. When they broke apart, Jake rested his forehead against hers. We don't need much, he murmured. No empire, she whispered. No money. No legacy. Just this, he said, eyes closed. Just us. She smiled, nodding softly. Just us. And there, on the old bridge above the river, the world didn't end. It didn't even change much. Right. The city still buzzed behind them. Trains still rumbled in the distance. Somewhere, people still chased things that didn't matter. But for Jake and Sarah, the chase was over. People. They had already found what mattered most. Not survival. Not revenge. People. Home. And it lived in a person, not a place. As they stood hand in hand, watching the river drift by like all the things they had lost, they didn't say another word. They didn't need to, not a word. Because they knew. Not a word. They'd been forged in the rain, forward, but they would live in the sun, together. If this story moved you, reminded you that healing is real, or renewed your belief in second chances, we invite you to subscribe to Healing Stories. Here, we share real-life journeys of strength, love, and hope. Stories that speak straight to the soul. Thank you for being here. And always remember, no matter how far you fall, there's always a way back to the light. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below and let us know.